Okay, so last episode we set ourselves up well to begin transitioning into a new room, and this episode that's exactly what we'll be doing. This is what we'll have by the end of this, so let's just get cracking. So because there is quite a lot for us to do here, this is going to be a slightly longer video than the usual 5 to 6 minutes, and by longer I mean by like a minute or two. Alright, so there's quite a lot of things that we're going to need to consider when setting all of this up, so let's quickly list them out, just so that we can see what we need to start. We'll need to wait for the fade out to be completely covering the screen before we start the logic. We'll need to deactivate the arrow indicators, and we'll also need to change up how this is working in the future, so that they're pointing at the correct doors when they complete the next room, but we'll come back to that later. We'll need to increase the wave count, change what room is active, move the player to the new room, and fade back into the game. Since we have already set up our reset zombie spawning method, it will make this a lot easier to set up. But before we do any of this, we're going to need a room for them to transition into. So I'm going to be creating just basically an empty one for this to start. So here's a short time lapse of me just quickly making the next room. Cool, now with the new room made, let's do some scene cleanup by moving our zombie spawners from room 1 into the room 1 object's parent, and then create some new room 2 spawners and put them in the room 2 object's parent. For the spawners, I'm going to put an identifier of R1 for the room 1 spawners and R2 for the room 2 ones. Next, let's sort the doors. So for this room, I'm going to switch it up and only have 3 doors instead of 4. So I'm going to move them into the relevant parent room object, give them all identifiers and set them up properly. I've also just quickly set up some transform positions for each room's player spawn point so that we can use them as references, and I've put it in room 1 and in room 2. Alright, so this time, instead of you seeing me type it out, I've already written it, mainly because I couldn't be bothered to rewrite it. So just copy this code and I'll quickly explain the changes. You'll see I've made some headers to separate out the variables into groups. The only additions for beginning this process that we've got is an array of game objects for the rooms and an array of player spawn point transforms. I've created a new method called beginNextRoom, and that has a start coroutine called beginRoomTransition. In here, we're basically just doing that list that I said at the beginning of the video. Wait for the fade, deactivate the arrows, increase the wave, change what room is active, move the player to the position, then I'm waiting 1 more second and fading back in. I've also under this created a new method called fadeOutScene, so this can be called separately and taken out of the reset zombie method. Now we're finally going to get this functional. Inside your room transition script, we're going to call the fadeOutScene method from our manager and begin our next room method. I almost forgot to mention add the room complete equals false at the top of your begin room transition method. Otherwise those indicator arrows won't turn off. Now once you've set up all your variables and press play, you should have this result. Nice, so we're looking really good. Really, now we want to make all of this as modular as humanly possible so that we can quickly and easily start expanding the number of rooms which we have available on the map. This is going to require a big refactor, so let's just get going. Alright, so once again, this took me a while to get properly working, and I can't be bothered to retype it, so I'm just going to explain all the changes that have been done to get this endless transition logic going, so just copy what I've done as I'm going. So inside of our game manager, I've created a new class called roomData to hold 3 variables, being gameObject roomRoot, transform of player spawn point, and an array of game objects called doorboxes. I removed these variables from the top of the script and replaced it with a new list of room data called rooms. I changed the wave variable and renamed it to room index. We'll re-add the wave variable at a later date. If you want to mass rename the wave variable, hold Ctrl and double tap R on your keyboard. This will let you rename all instances of this variable in your script. In my update, I've got an if-else statement for if the room is completed or not. And in here, we're enabling the door boxes if the room is complete, and disabling them if it's not complete. Now, down in our begin room transition method, we're going to be doing this. Start by calling the reset zombie spawning. Wait 1.5 seconds for the fade, disable the indicator arrows, adding 1 to the room index, and if that value goes above the room count, it will loop back to 0, bringing us back to the first room, giving us an endless gameplay loop. Do a for each loop, disabling all of our rooms whilst we're blacked out, get the next room from our room index, and setting that one to be active. Get our player, and move them to the next room spawn point, wait for 1 more second, and then fade back in. Now we'll move into our room transition script, and I've removed the reset spawning from in here, and instead I'm setting the room complete to false. Finally, in our zombie spawner script, I've moved our start logic into an onEnabled method instead. as when we loop back to the first room, the zombies won't spawn as the start method has already fired. Having an on-enabled means whenever these objects get re-enabled in the future, they'll start spawning again. Now set up all of your variables in the inspector and press play. If you give your game a playthrough, you should now see that we can successfully transition into room 2, and then when room 2 is completed, you'll transition back into room 1, so on and so forth. The last thing we need to do now is sort out our indicator arrows so that when they're re-enabled, they point at the correct doors. So to get these arrow indicators pointing correctly and also only showing the needed number of them, let's head into our door arrow visualization script. Inside we'll add 2 variables, one being a boolean for has populated, and a game manager reference which we'll get in our start method as usual. We'll create 3 new methods being update arrows visibility, clear door references, and populate door references. In our clear door references, we're going to check if the references are null, and if they are, return. Then we'll clear the doors array by its length, removing the references, and resize the array to hold nothing, then setting the has populated bool to false. Now in our populate door references method, we'll check if has populated equals false. If it is, we'll create a new local array of door boxes and set that to the current room index's door boxes. We'll set the length of the doors array to the length of this local game object array and then populate it with a for loop. Finally, we'll set has populated to true and update the arrow's visibility. Inside of the update arrow visibility method, we'll check the number of doors in the doors array, loop through how many there are, and only set the needed number of arrows to active. This makes it so if we have less than 4 doors in our scene, in our case 3, only 3 will show, and if there's 4, 4 will show, 2 will show, and so on. And to get it functional in your project, go into your game manager, create a serialized field game object of UI so that we can access the script. Then we'll get the component of door arrow visualization, and in room complete, we'll fire the populate doors reference, and if room is not complete, we'll clear the door references. Now when we press play and you start having a little playthrough of your game, you'll see that every time that we're in a new room and you clear it, the correct number of arrows will display pointing towards the correct doors. So we'll finish up there for today. This setup we have going is going to work great as it's super modular so that we can very quickly and easily set up loads more rooms without really having to do any crazy setup. Just make the room, populate the variables, bang, you've got another environment just so quickly and so easily. Next time we're going to start getting the zombies doing damage to the player and handling player death, so that should be a fun time as well. And I'll see you then.